On June 22, 1941, German troops invaded the territory of the Soviet Union. The bloodiest war in the history of our country began. The first months of hostilities were catastrophic for the Red Army. The rapid advance of the enemy, the encirclement of large groups of Soviet troops, the loss of vast territories, all this created the impression of an inevitable defeat. By the end of August, German tank wedges had deeply penetrated Soviet soil. Army Group Center was rushing towards Moscow, creating bridgeheads for a decisive thrust at the capital. One such bridgehead formed in the area of the small Smolensk town of Yelnya. This salient, wedged into the Soviet troop dispositions, posed a serious threat. From here, the German command planned to strike the rear of Soviet units defending the Moscow direction. Control over Yelnya gave the Germans a strategic advantage, the ability to attack in several directions at once. At this critical moment, the Soviet command made a decision that seemed insane to many: to switch from defense to offense and eliminate the dangerous salient. The Yelnya salient was a small section of the front, only about 30 kilometers at its base and 25 kilometers deep. But its strategic significance was incommensurably greater than its modest size. Located on high ground, this area dominated the surrounding terrain, allowing control over a significant territory. The German command viewed Yelnya as an ideal bridgehead for a further offensive on Moscow. From here, direct routes opened up to Dorogobuj and Vyazma, key points on the approaches to the capital. The geographical position of the salient posed a serious threat to Soviet troops. From this sector, the enemy could launch flanking attacks on our units defending the Moscow direction. The strategic Warsaw Highway, one of the main transport arteries leading to Moscow, passed through Yelnya. Control over this road provided the Germans with rapid troop transfers and supplies for advancing units. In addition, the Smolensk-Sukhinichi railway line, which was important for frontline supply, passed through here. The hilly terrain with numerous ravines, groves, and small rivers created natural defensive lines. The Germans skillfully used these landscape features, turning the Yelnya salient into a powerful fortified area. Artillery positions were equipped on the dominant heights, allowing them to shell the approaches to the salient. Settlements were transformed into strongholds with a system of dugouts, bunkers, and trenches. German fortifications on the northern face of the salient posed a particular danger. From here, the enemy could strike the flank and rear of Soviet troops defending in the Smolensk direction. Thus, the Yelnya salient was not just a tactical bridgehead, it was a strategic hub, the retention of which provided the Germans with advantageous positions for continuing the offensive on Moscow. The elimination of this salient became a vitally important task for the Soviet command. The formation of the Yelnya salient began in the first half of July 1941, when units of Guderian's 2nd Panzer Group rapidly advanced deep into Soviet territory. On July 10, German motorized units captured the city of Yelnya, creating a dangerous wedge in the disposition of Soviet troops. This was one of the key moments of Operation Barbarossa in the central sector. The German command viewed this area as an important bridgehead for a further offensive to the east. Immediately after the capture of the city, German engineering units began to create a powerful defense system. Using the terrain features, they turned the Yelnya salient into a real fortress. Long-term firing points with overlapping sectors of fire were equipped on the heights. The forward edge of the defense was covered by several lines of wire obstacles and minefields. Artillery positions, capable of supporting any section of the defense with fire, were located deep within the salient. To hold this strategically important area, the German command allocated significant forces, units of the 20th Panzer and 10th Motorized Divisions, as well as several infantry formations. The total strength of the group exceeded 50,000 men, supported by 200 tanks and powerful artillery. The Soviet command quickly realized the danger emanating from the Yelnya salient. Already from mid-July, attempts were made to counterattack German positions. Units of General Rakutin's 24th Army repeatedly undertook offensive actions, trying to dislodge the enemy. Particularly fierce battles unfolded in the 20th days of July. Soviet troops, despite a shortage of ammunition and heavy equipment, attacked German fortifications. The 119th and 120th Rifle Divisions distinguished themselves especially in these battles. Their soldiers displayed mass heroism, but they failed to break through the deeply echeloned enemy defense. The Germans skillfully used the advantages of defense, meeting our attacks with concentrated artillery and machine gun fire. By the end of July, it became obvious that it would not be possible to eliminate the salient with local counterattacks. A carefully planned operation involving significant forces was required. At the same time, the situation in other sectors of the front did not allow for the concentration of the necessary reserves. The Soviet command had to temporarily abandon active operations in this area, focusing on containing the enemy and accumulating forces for a future offensive. In late August 1941, tension reigned at the headquarters of the Supreme High Command. Despite the generally difficult situation on the fronts, it was here that an idea was born that would later change the course of the war. Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov, just appointed commander of the Reserve Front, proposed a bold plan to launch a counterattack on the Yelnya salient. This decision seemed risky to many. In conditions where Soviet troops were retreating everywhere, the idea of going on the offensive seemed almost insane. However, Zhukov insisted, "The Yelnya salient is a knife aimed at the heart of our defense. If we don't eliminate it now, tomorrow will be too late." Stalin, after listening to the commander's report, remained silent for a long time, peering at the map. Finally, he said, "Act, but remember, failure is unacceptable." On August 21, a directive of the Stavka VGK was signed, regarding the conduct of an offensive operation by the forces of the 24th Army. The document prescribed, "Eliminate the enemy's Yelnya salient, which poses a threat to the flanks of our troops." Zhukov personally controlled the development of the operation plan. He understood that success depended on careful preparation. The main idea was to deliver two converging blows, from the north and south, with the aim of encircling and destroying the German grouping. Special attention was paid to artillery support. Zhukov demanded the creation of maximum fire density in the directions of the main attacks. Intelligence reported serious enemy fortifications. The Germans had turned the Yelnya salient into a real fortress with a multi-tiered fire system. Such a defense could only be overcome with careful planning and clear interaction of all branches of the armed forces. The commander understood. The price of error was thousands of lives of Soviet soldiers. Intensive preparations began in the troops. Commanders received clear instructions: study the terrain, practice the interaction of infantry with artillery, conduct reconnaissance. Special attention was paid to masking preparatory measures. Zhukov personally inspected units, delving into the smallest details of the upcoming operation. He met with division commanders, demanding initiative and decisiveness from them. Don't expect the enemy to give up positions themselves. Every meter will have to be taken with a fight, he said. On August 28th, the last meeting of the command staff took place. Zhukov once again emphasized the significance of the upcoming operation. Comrade commanders, for the first time since the beginning of the war, we are moving from defense to offense. This is not just a tactical task, it is a turning point. We must prove to both the enemy and ourselves that we are capable of winning. The offensive was scheduled for August 30th. The whole country, holding its breath, waited. Would the Red Army be able to turn the tide of the war? By the end of August 1941, the forces of the opposing sides in the Yelnya salient presented an interesting picture. On the Soviet side, the operation was conducted by the 24th Army, under the command of Major General Konstantin Ivanovich Rakutin. It consisted of the 102nd, 103rd, 120th, 125th, 129th, 135th, 144th, and 249th Rifle Divisions, as well as the 106th Tank Division. The total strength of the Soviet grouping reached 100,000 men, armed with about 100 tanks, 1,100 guns and mortars. Air support was provided by the aviation of the Reserve Front, numbering about 60 aircraft. They were opposed by units of the German Fourth Army, which occupied well-fortified positions. The core of the grouping consisted of 5 infantry divisions: the 17th, 137th, 178th, 268th, and 292nd. The total strength of German troops in the salient was estimated at 70,000 men, supported by 120 tanks and about 800 guns. German aviation had air superiority, with approximately 120 aircraft. The balance of forces appeared roughly equal in terms of manpower, with a slight advantage for Soviet troops. However, this quantitative superiority was offset by qualitative factors. German units had 2 years of successful military campaigns in Europe behind them, well-honed tactics of interaction, and high morale. Their officers had extensive combat experience, and their soldiers were superbly trained. In addition, the Germans occupied prepared defensive positions, which gave them a significant tactical advantage. Soviet troops, on the other hand, were still going through a period of formation. Many units had been recently formed or replenished after heavy defensive battles. Commanders were only mastering the art of troop command in the difficult conditions of modern warfare. Most soldiers lacked sufficient combat experience. The technical equipment of Soviet units also left much to be desired. There was a shortage of communications equipment, motor transport, and engineering equipment. The issue of tanks was particularly acute. There were few of them, and a significant portion of the vehicles required repair. However, Soviet troops had an important advantage: growing confidence in their own strength, and the understanding that there was nowhere left to retreat. Soldiers and officers were eager to prove that the Red Army was capable not only of defending, but also of attacking. The command sought to maximize this moral advantage in the upcoming operation. Preparations for the Yelnya Operation began with extensive reconnaissance activities. The command of the 24th Army sought to obtain the most complete information possible about the enemy. Aerial reconnaissance flights were conducted daily over German positions, recording the locations of firing points, accumulations of equipment, and troop movements. Aerial photographs were of particular value, allowing the identification of camouflaged artillery positions and enemy reserves. Ground reconnaissance was no less active. Reconnaissance groups, penetrating deep into enemy territory, gathered information about the defense system, minefields, and wire obstacles. The capture of tongues, prisoners, allowed for the clarification of data on the strength and morale of German units. Information about the location of enemy command posts and communication hubs proved to be especially valuable. Radio intelligence continuously monitored the airwaves, intercepting communications from German headquarters. All gathered information was thoroughly analyzed at Army headquarters, creating a detailed map of the enemy's defenses. Based on the intelligence data, General Rakutin, together with his staff, developed the operation plan. The main idea was to deliver 2 powerful blows to the base of the salient from the north and south. The Northern Strike Group included the 135th, 144th, and 129th Rifle Divisions. They were to advance from the Guryevo area in the direction of Ushakovo. The Southern Group, consisting of the 102nd, 103rd, and 120th Rifle Divisions, was to attack from the Kukwevo area towards Vidra. After these groups linked up in the Yelnya area, It was planned to encircle and destroy the German forces in the salient. To create a superiority of forces in the directions of the main thrusts, the command took a bold step. It denuded secondary sectors, concentrating maximum forces on the decisive directions. Special attention was paid to artillery support. Artillery units received strict instructions regarding ammunition expenditure and target allocation. The main efforts were concentrated on suppressing enemy strongholds and resistance nodes. Special anti-tank reserves were created to combat German tanks. Engineer units prepared passages through minefields and wire obstacles. Sappers trained to operate under enemy fire, neutralizing mines and establishing crossings over obstacles. Signalmen laid cable lines, ensuring reliable communication between headquarters and forward units. Rear services established stockpiles of ammunition, food, and medical supplies. Particular attention was paid to the evacuation of the wounded from the battlefield. Field hospitals were deployed in the immediate rear, preparing to receive casualties. On August 29th, the final meeting of the command staff took place. Tasks were clarified, troop readiness was checked, and issues of interaction were resolved. The offensive was set for the morning of August 30th. Party meetings and rallies were held in the units. Soldiers were explained the significance of the upcoming operation. The mood in the troops was upbeat. The soldiers were eager to prove that the Red Army was capable of defeating the enemy. The night before the offensive was anxious. Commanders checked the readiness of units, clarified tasks, and spoke with the soldiers. Everyone understood the historical importance of the moment. For the first time since the beginning of the war, Soviet troops were launching a major offensive. On August 30th, 1941, at 5 o'clock in the morning, the silence over the Yelnya salient was shattered by the roar of Soviet artillery. Hundreds of guns unleashed tons of metal on German positions. The earth trembled, the air filled with the whistle of shells and the thunder of explosions. The first major offensive operation of the Red Army since the beginning of the war had begun. The artillery preparation lasted an hour and a half. Soviet artillerymen methodically suppressed enemy firing points, destroyed dugouts and pillboxes, and eliminated wire obstacles. Special attention was paid to German artillery positions and command posts. At 6:30 in the morning, the artillery fire was shifted deeper into the enemy's defense. This was the signal for the infantry, forward. The fighters rose from the trenches and moved towards the enemy positions. The Northern Strike Group, under the command of Colonel Berestov, attacked the enemy in the Guryevo area. Colonel Smirnov's 135th Rifle Division delivered the main blow. Its fighters, overcoming minefields and wire obstacles, stubbornly advanced. The Germans met the attackers with hurricane machine gun fire. Particularly fierce resistance was offered by machine gun nests located on height 182.3. The commander of the Rifle Battalion, Captain Nikolaev, made a bold decision to bypass the height from the flank. The maneuver was successful. A group of fighters led by Lieutenant Smirnov went behind the German machine gunners and showered them with grenades. The way was open. By noon of the first day of the offensive, the northern group had advanced 2 to 3 kilometers, overcoming the first line of German defense. The Southern Strike Group, under the command of Major General Prokhorov, acted no less decisively. The 102nd and 120th Rifle Divisions attacked the enemy in the Kukwevo area. Here, Soviet troops were opposed by units of the German 268th Infantry Division. The Germans had created a powerful defense system, utilizing the features of the terrain. Every height, every grove was turned into strongholds with crossfire. The attackers literally had to gnaw into the ground, overcoming enemy resistance. Particularly distinguished in these battles was the commander of a rifle company, Senior Lieutenant Petrov. His company was the first to break into the German trenches. In hand-to-hand combat, Soviet soldiers destroyed up to a platoon of the enemy and captured 3 machine guns. Developing the success, Petrov's company advanced 1.5 kilometers, creating a breach in the German defense. By the end of the first day of the offensive, the southern group had advanced up to 4 kilometers deep. The German command was caught off guard by the scale and strength of the Soviet offensive. The commander of the Fourth Army, Field Marshal von Kluge, urgently transferred reserves to the breakthrough area. Units of the 178th Infantry Division and several tank companies. Fierce battles continued on August 31. Soviet troops, overcoming stubborn enemy resistance, slowly but steadily advanced. The Germans counterattacked, trying to restore the situation, but each time they retreated, suffering heavy losses. By the end of the second day of the offensive, the depth of the Soviet troops' advance ranged from 5 to 7 kilometers. The Yelnya salient began to shrink. On September 3rd, the Soviet offensive reached its decisive phase. After breaking through the enemy's first line of defense, our units reached the main German fortifications. A deeply echeloned system of pillboxes, trenches, and minefields confronted the attackers. The command of the 24th Army decided to change tactics. Instead of frontal assaults, they opted for flanking maneuvers and the actions of assault groups. Artillery played a special role in breaking through the German defense. Colonel Kazakov, commander of the Army's artillery, developed a new method of fire support for infantry. Instead of the traditional sequential shifting of fire in depth, the artillerymen created fire corridors, through which the assault groups advanced. The 135th Rifle Division encountered particularly fierce resistance in the area of Hill 210. The Germans had turned this hill into a veritable fortress with a multi-tiered firing system. The division commander, Colonel Smirnov, made an unconventional decision: to attack the hill at night. Captain Ivanov's battalion, using the cover of darkness, managed to stealthily approach the German positions, and with a sudden strike, seized a key strongpoint. The capture of the hill opened the way for further advance. The southern grouping of Soviet forces, overcoming stubborn enemy resistance, reached the village of Vidra, an important node of the German defense, by the end of September 4th. Particularly fierce battles erupted here. The Germans, understanding the strategic importance of this point, launched a counterattack with an infantry battalion supported by 15 tanks. A critical situation arose in the sector of the 102nd Rifle Division. German tanks broke through the forward edge of our defense and created a threat of encirclement for the advanced units. At this moment, the commander of the anti-tank battalion, Major Petrov, brought his guns to direct fire. In a fierce battle, the artillerymen knocked out 8 German tanks. The rest turned back. The enemy's counterattack faltered. By September 6, 1941, Soviet troops had closely approached Yelnya. The city, transformed by the Germans into a powerful defensive stronghold, was the enemy's last bastion in the salient. The command of the 24th Army developed a detailed assault plan. The main idea was to envelop the city from the flanks with a simultaneous frontal attack. Special assault groups were formed for the assault, consisting of riflemen, sappers, and flamethrower operators. Each group received a specific task to destroy certain enemy objectives. On the morning of September 6th, after a powerful artillery barrage, Soviet troops launched a decisive offensive. The 135th and 129th Rifle Divisions attacked the city from the north, the 102nd and 120th from the south, and the 144th delivered a frontal blow from the east. The Germans resisted fiercely. Every house, every street became a battlefield. Particularly fierce clashes unfolded in the city center, where the enemy had established powerful strongholds. Lieutenant Smirnov's assault group, acting at the vanguard of the 144th Division, managed to break through to the city administration building, where the German headquarters was located. In a fierce battle, the soldiers destroyed the garrison and captured important documents. Artillerymen rolled out guns for direct fire, shooting enemy firing points at point-blank range. Snipers systematically eliminated German machine gunners, ensuring the infantry's advance. By noon, Soviet units linked up in the city center. The Germans, realizing the hopelessness of their situation, began to retreat. However, the retreat routes were already cut off. Many German units found themselves encircled and were destroyed or captured. By 1600 hours, the city was completely cleared of the enemy. The red banner flew over the city administration building. Yelnya, the first major populated area liberated by the Red Army since the beginning of the war, returned to native hands. The liberation of Yelnya had enormous moral significance. For the first time since the beginning of the war, Soviet troops not only stopped the enemy, but also pushed him back, reclaiming an important strategic point. This victory demonstrated to the whole world that the myth of the German army's invincibility had been dispelled. The Red Army proved that it was capable not only of defending, but also of attacking, crushing the vaunted German divisions. For Soviet soldiers and officers, this victory became a powerful moral stimulus. They saw that the enemy was not as strong as it seemed at first, that he could and should be beaten. In liberated Yelnya, residents with tears in their eyes met their liberators. They told of the atrocities of the occupiers, of executions and looting. These stories further strengthened the determination of Soviet soldiers to expel the invaders from their native land. News of Yelnya's liberation spread like lightning throughout the country. Soviet newspapers came out with triumphant headlines. Sovinformbureau reports detailed the successful operation. This victory instilled hope in the hearts of millions of Soviet people, showing that a turning point in the war was possible. By September 8, 1941, the Yelnya Operation entered its final phase. After liberating the city, Soviet troops continued to pursue the retreating enemy, striving to completely eliminate the salient and prevent the Germans from consolidating new positions. Units of the 135th and 129th Rifle Divisions moved westward, clearing settlements and forests of the enemy. The Germans, having lost key strongholds, retreated, offering rearguard resistance. They mined roads, set up ambushes, striving to slow the advance of Soviet troops. Particularly fierce battles unfolded in the area of the village of Leonidovo, where the German rearguard attempted to organize a defense. The commander of the Rifle Battalion, Major Sokolov, decided to flank the village. The maneuver succeeded. The Germans, fearing encirclement, hastily retreated, abandoning heavy weapons. By the end of September 7th, the salient was practically eliminated. Soviet troops reached a line 10 to 12 kilometers west of Yelnya. Here the command decided to consolidate. Work began on creating defensive positions. Sappers mined approaches, infantry dug trenches and dugouts, artillerymen equipped firing positions. On September 8th, the last pockets of enemy resistance were suppressed. The Yelnya salient ceased to exist. Soviet troops straightened the front line, creating a stable defense. Enemy losses during the operation amounted to more than 20,000 killed and wounded. 45 tanks, 200 artillery pieces, over 300 machine guns, and much other military equipment were captured. Approximately 2,000 German soldiers and officers were taken prisoner. Soviet troops also suffered significant losses, about 30,000 killed and wounded. Several dozen tanks and artillery pieces were lost. However, the strategic result of the operation fully justified these sacrifices. The elimination of the Yelnya salient was of enormous importance for the overall situation on the front. A serious threat of a flank attack on Soviet troops defending the Moscow direction was eliminated. The German command lost an important bridgehead for an offensive on Moscow. Moreover, the enemy was forced to go on the defensive in this sector, which gave the Soviet command time to prepare to repel the general offensive on the capital. The Yelnya operation became the first example of the successful application of new tactics for breaking through fortified enemy defenses. The experience gained in these battles was thoroughly studied and used in planning subsequent offensive operations. The main outcome of the Yelnya Operation, however, was its moral effect. For the first time since the beginning of the war, Soviet troops not only stopped, but also pushed back the enemy, reclaiming significant territory. This victory proved that the German army could be defeated, that the myth of its invincibility was nothing more than a myth. On September 8, 1941, Joseph Stalin gathered the highest military leadership in his office. The atmosphere was unusual. For the first time in many months of the war, the faces of those present showed not only tension, but also restrained optimism. The Supreme Commander-in-Chief carefully listened to the report on the completion of the Yelnya Operation. A long pause followed. Stalin slowly paced around the office, considering a fundamentally important decision. Finally, he stopped and said, "We must especially distinguish the divisions that excelled in the battles. They earned this with their blood." Thus, the Soviet Guards were born, the elite of the Red Army, a symbol of military valor and skill. On September 18th, Order number 384 of the People's Commissar of Defense of the USSR was signed. It stated, "In numerous battles for our Soviet motherland against the fascist invaders, units of the Red Army have shown examples of courage, bravery, discipline, and organization. In battles with the German invaders, individual divisions have shown examples of heroism, steadfastness, and high military skill. 4 rifle divisions that distinguished themselves in the Yelnya Operation received the honorary title of Guards. These were the 135th, 127th, 139th, and 150th Rifle Divisions, which became, respectively, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Guards Divisions. The decision to create Guards units was not spontaneous. Even during the Yelnya Operation, the command identified formations that demonstrated exceptional steadfastness and combat skill. The commander of the Reserve Front, Georgy Zhukov, personally presented Stalin with a list of distinguished divisions, thoroughly substantiating their merits. Stalin carefully studied the presented materials. He understood that at a critical moment of the war, the army needed not only material resources, but also moral incentives. Examples to follow. Guards units were to become a model for the entire Red Army, a source of combat traditions and high military spirit. The selection criteria for the 1st Guards Divisions were exceptionally strict. Not only the results of combat operations were taken into account, but also the morale of the personnel, discipline, organization, and coordination of branches of service. Special attention was paid to the initiative of commanders at all levels, their ability to make unconventional decisions in difficult combat situations. The transformation into Guards gave divisions not only an honorary title. The order provided for an increase in the authorized strength of personnel, reinforcement of artillery, engineering, and other special units. Soldiers and commanders of Guards units received increased monetary allowances. Special insignia were established for them, Guard badges, and later, Guard ranks. The creation of Guards units was of great importance for the further development of the Red Army. This decision was an important step in forming a new system of military values based on the traditions of Russian military history. The very term Guards referred back to Peter the Great's times, to the glorious victories of Russian arms. Guards units became custodians of the best combat traditions, a school of advanced experience for the entire army. They were the first to receive new weapons and equipment, becoming a testing ground for new tactical methods. The psychological effect of creating the Guards is difficult to overestimate. In the most difficult period of the war, this decision demonstrated the country's leadership's confidence in ultimate victory, in the Army's ability not only to defend, but also to advance, smashing elite enemy units. For millions of Soviet soldiers, the Guards became an example to follow, an embodiment of military valor and skill. The 4 rifle divisions that participated in the Yelnya Offensive became the first Guards units of the Red Army. Their path to this high title was marked by unparalleled courage and military skill. The 135th Rifle Division, under the command of Colonel Ivan Nikitich Rusyanov, particularly distinguished itself in the assault on Height 210. This key German position seemed impregnable. 3 previous attacks had floundered under hurricane enemy fire. Then Rusyanov made an unconventional decision: to attack at night. The soldiers moved in complete silence, without a single shot. Using the terrain's folds, they stealthily approached the enemy trenches. The sudden bayonet charge caught the Germans off guard. The height was taken with minimal casualties, and the division gained the opportunity to develop the offensive. The 127th Rifle Division of Major General Alexander Zotovich Akimenko showed exceptional skill in breaking through the enemy's fortified defenses. Regimental and battalion commanders developed a special infiltration tactic. Small assault groups penetrated the gaps between German strongholds and attacked them from the rear. The division's artillerymen rolled their guns into direct fire positions, shelling enemy pillboxes from minimal distances. In one such battle, Sergeant Pavlov's crew, left with only 2 men at the gun, continued to fire, repelling a counterattack by German infantry supported by tanks. The 139th Rifle Division of Colonel Belyayev distinguished itself by the skillful interaction of various branches of service. Infantrymen, artillerymen, and sappers acted as a single mechanism. When the Germans blocked the advancing units with a powerful minefield, sappers cleared passages under enemy fire. Artillery suppressed firing points, and the infantry, with a swift dash, overcame the dangerous zone. In the area of the village of Ushakovo, Lieutenant Smirnov's company found itself cut off from the main forces. For 2 days, the soldiers maintained an all-around defense, repelling continuous enemy attacks. When ammunition ran out, they launched a bayonet charge and broke through to their own. The 150th Rifle Division of Major General Ivan Gusev demonstrated examples of offensive zeal. Its soldiers did not stop before the most difficult obstacles. At a critical moment in the battle for Height 144, political instructor Petrov rallied the soldiers, who had taken cover under fire, into attack. Despite being wounded, he was the first to break into enemy trenches, leading the others. What united these divisions, allowing them to act more effectively than others? First and foremost, a high level of training of the command staff. Commanders at all levels showed initiative, were not afraid to take responsibility in difficult situations. They skillfully used maneuver, concentrated forces in decisive directions. The second factor, well-coordinated interaction of branches of service. Infantry, artillery, sappers acted in concert, supporting each other. The third factor, high morale of the personnel. The soldiers of these divisions believed in victory, were ready for self-sacrifice to achieve the goal. Many of them already had combat experience gained in defensive battles and burned with desire to avenge the enemy for the retreat, for the burned cities and villages. The fourth factor, competent use of terrain and time of day. Commanders skillfully chose directions of attacks, used terrain folds for covert maneuver, often conducted attacks at dawn or at night. Finally, the fifth factor, constant enemy reconnaissance. Commanders at all levels sought to obtain the most complete information about the enemy before an attack. The Yelnya Operation became a true laboratory of combat experience, where tactical innovations were born, subsequently adopted by the entire Red Army. For the first time, Soviet command successfully applied the principle of massing forces and means on narrow breakthrough sectors. Instead of evenly distributing troops along the entire front, the main forces were concentrated in the directions of the main attacks, creating a decisive superiority over the enemy. Artillery transitioned from the usual rolling barrage to a more flexible system of fire support for infantry. The commander of the 24th Army Artillery, Colonel Kazakov, developed a method of sequential target suppression, where fire was shifted from one line to the next in strict accordance with the advance of attacking units. Special attention was paid to combating enemy strong points. To destroy them, special groups were created, equipped with anti-tank rifles and backpack flamethrowers. These groups operated on the flanks and in the rear of strong points, disabling key elements of the defense. The tactics of tank employment changed significantly. Instead of dispersing armored vehicles along the entire front, tank units were used compactly to develop success in breakthrough directions. Tanks operated in close cooperation with infantry, providing them with fire support and cover from enemy counterattacks. Aviation also played an important role in the success of the operation. IL-2 attack aircraft delivered pinpoint strikes against enemy strongpoints, suppressing their firepower directly before the infantry attack. Fighters reliably covered advancing troops from airstrikes. One of the main lessons of the Yelnya Operation was the understanding of the importance of thorough reconnaissance. Before each attack, detailed reconnaissance of enemy defenses was carried out. Weak points were identified, and the directions of main attacks were determined. Ground and air reconnaissance worked in close cooperation, complementing each other. The command of the 24th Army paid special attention to the suddenness of actions. Troop regroupings were carried out covertly, at night. False concentrations and demonstrative actions misled the enemy regarding the direction of the main attack. For the first time, night attack tactics were used on a wide scale. Operating in the dark, Soviet units achieved surprise, neutralizing the German superiority in firepower. Specially trained assault groups penetrated deep into enemy defenses, disrupting their command and control system. All these tactical innovations, born in the crucible of the Yelnya Operation, formed the basis of the Red Army's combat experience, were studied and creatively developed in subsequent offensive operations. Yelnya became the first step on the long road to victory, the first proof that the German war machine could not only be stopped, but also turned back. The Yelnya Operation became a strategic shock for the German command. For the first time since the beginning of the war, the Wehrmacht not only stopped, but was forced to retreat, losing an important bridgehead. This disrupted the neat plan of the blitzkrieg, which did not foresee serious setbacks. Field Marshal von Bock, commander of Army Group Center, reported to Berlin. Soviet troops demonstrated an unexpected ability for an organized offensive. The loss of Yelnya requires a revision of our operational plans. Hitler was enraged by the news of the defeat. At a meeting at the Stavka, he demanded explanations from the generals. The commander of the Fourth Army, von Kluge, tried to justify the retreat by a lack of reserves and stretched communications. However, the Führer was unyielding. No retreats! Every meter of captured territory must be held at all costs. Nevertheless, the German command was forced to make adjustments to the plan of Operation Typhoon, the general offensive on Moscow. The start date of the operation had to be shifted by 2 weeks to regroup forces and bring up reserves. This delay, which seemed insignificant, subsequently played a fateful role. The offensive on Moscow began during the autumn muddy season and then early cold weather. For the Soviet command, the success at Yelnya had enormous strategic significance. Firstly, the immediate threat of a flanking attack on the troops covering the Moscow direction was eliminated. Secondly, the Germans lost an important bridgehead for the offensive on the capital. Thirdly, Soviet troops gained a favorable defensive line, significantly complicating the enemy's further advance. Zhukov, analyzing the results of the operation, noted, "We proved that we can not only defend but also attack." This changed the psychology of our commanders and fighters. Stalin carefully studied the experience of the Yelnya Operation. He understood that a difficult battle for Moscow was imminent. The success at Yelnya allowed for the identification of the most effective formations, which subsequently played a key role in the defense of the capital. 4 Guards divisions, born in the Yelnya battles, became the backbone of the assault groups that stopped the Germans on the approaches to Moscow. The experience of breaking through the enemy's fortified defense was thoroughly studied and used in planning the counteroffensive near Moscow in December 41st. Many tactical methods, first applied at Yelnya, became standard for subsequent offensive operations of the Red Army. The Yelnya Operation forever inscribed its name in the history of the Great Patriotic War as the first successful offensive operation of Soviet troops. Its significance extends far beyond tactical success. It became a turning point in the psychological perception of the war. For the first time, the myth of the invincibility of the German army was dispelled. For the first time, Soviet soldiers tasted victory. Historians unanimously assess the Yelnya Operation as a harbinger of future major victories for the Red Army. It was here, on a small section of the front, that tactical techniques and combat methods were born, which later formed the basis of Soviet military art. The memory of the heroes of the Yelnya battle is carefully preserved in the hearts of descendants. Memorial complexes have been erected at the sites of fierce battles, and monuments and obelisks have been installed. In Yelnya itself, a museum of military glory has been created, where unique exhibits are collected, personal belongings of the battle participants, documents, photographs, and weapons. Annually in September, solemn events dedicated to the liberation of the city are held here. Thousands of people come to honor the memory of the fallen heroes. A special place in the memorial exhibition is occupied by materials about the 1st Guards divisions. Their combat path, which began near Yelnya, is traced all the way to Berlin. Many of those who received their baptism of fire in the Yelnya forests and fields later became outstanding military leaders, heroes of the Soviet Union. Modern military science continues to study the experience of the Yelnya Operation. Methods of breaking through fortified enemy defenses, the interaction of various branches of service, and troop control in an offensive. All these aspects are still relevant today. Military academies include the study of the Yelnya Operation in their curricula. Cadets analyze the decisions of commanders who operated in those difficult conditions. For the patriotic education of youth, the example of the Yelnya Operation has special value. It shows that even in the most difficult circumstances, when it seems that the enemy is invincible, one can find the strength to resist and win. The history of the first successful offensive teaches resilience, courage, and faith in one's own strength. Today, as we look back at the events of those distant days, we understand the Yelnya Operation was not just a military success. It became a symbol of a turning point, the first ray of hope in the darkness of retreats and defeats. Here, on Smolensk soil, the Soviet soldier first felt that he could not only retreat, but also win. This confidence, born in the Yelnya forests and fields, carried through the entire war, ultimately led our army to Berlin.